Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Enrique Granados, and I'm an assistant director of admission school year abroad. And I'm here with two awesome alums. Today, they're here to share a little bit about their experiences with you. I want to say thank you to everyone who's watching this Q&A with our alums. As most of you are aware, this year's current SYA students are back in their homes. Most of them continuing their experience online with SYA. We're currently in unprecedented situations around the world. Everyone's doing our part to mitigate the effects of COVID-19. But in the meantime, we wanted to give you guys an idea of what the SYA experience is from some students who have completed the experience. So we have two awesome alums here with us today. Would you guys please introduce yourselves and when you did SYA and where you're from?
Yeah, so my name's Ella. I did SYA from the 2018-2019 school year. I was a senior when I did it, so I am now a freshman at Dartmouth College, and I am from Nashville, Tennessee.
My name is Garrett. I'm from Rochester, New York, and I was at SYA France the same year as Ella. I was a sophomore when I did it. I believe it was the first year that sophomores were allowed to do it. But so now I'm a junior at Pittsburgh Bennett High School.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, guys. And for those of you that are going to be watching this, we will be covering a bunch of topics. So I'll go over them just really quickly so you guys have an idea of where we're going. We're going to hear a little bit about some of their memories and experiences with their host families while they were abroad. SYA, one of the core experiences is obviously the host family, where students live with host families for the duration of their time abroad. We're going to be talking about some of the co-curricular activities that they did while they were in Rennes. We're also going to be talking about travel and independent and educational types of travel that are available to the students at SYA France. And then we'll have plenty of time to go over anything that our alums would like to go over. So with that, we'll start with Ella. Ella, how did you decide to study abroad in high school?
Well, I had been wanting to study abroad actually since 7th grade. The idea had always interested me, and I'd always kind of wanted to expand my view of the world and my experiences pretty early on. The reason I decided to do it in high school, specifically senior year, was that before I even went, I could tell that I would benefit enormously from it, and I would get a lot of new perspectives from the experience, which I thought would be extremely valuable to have before going into college. Since I know a lot of people do study abroad in college and wait until then to have that experience, but I kind of could see that having that knowledge ahead of time would really not only inform my decision of where to go to college, but maybe what I wanted to study and what kind of trajectory I wanted to continue along afterwards. And then I also always loved France. I'd taken French in high school and in middle school, and the idea of really getting to live there and immerse myself in the culture while also not sacrificing my academic path, that was the perfect combination for me. It was just enough comfort to have those fellow Americans with me and have that same academic structure, but also living with the host family, having my classes in French, being able to travel in France would definitely it pushed me enough out of my comfort zone that it just seemed like the perfect opportunity to really expand my horizons before getting to college.
Awesome. Garrett, what about you?
So I was exposed to French West Africa from school when I was in, I think, middle school. And it really grabbed my interest. So I went to my parents in 9th grade and I said, I really want to learn French. Can I go live in Senegal for a year? And their answer was pretty sharply, no way. There's no program over there. There's no structure, no nothing. France at that point, hadn't even come to my mind, but then I threw it out, what about France? And that made kind of, starting off with the, door in the face question that made convincing them to let me go to France not that difficult. We were looking around and looking around for programs where I could go live in France, and my main goal was to learn French. It's a language that I've always liked, And that whole aspect with French West Africa, really made me want to become fluent in French. Um, we found SYA, and it, was pretty clearly the perfect choice, like Ella said, because you get that kind of international study abroad experience while staying on the same academic track that you'd be on in the United States. And SYA provided exactly that. I was able to take my classes in French and hang out with French people, live with a French family, really be immersed in France, while at the same time, I came back to school, came into junior year, and I hadn't lost anything. I was right where I would have been and right where I should be.
Awesome. Yeah, it's amazing to me how many students every year come to the SYA admissions process from such different backgrounds, and both of you are perfect examples of that, where I think the SYA experience is incredibly unifying when students get together and they realize, oh, all these people have a similar passion. We just all come from different places.
Absolutely.
Garrett, would you remind me? What are you wearing there? What's around your neck there?
This is my Stade Rennais scarf. Stade Rennais is the soccer, as they call it over there, the football club in Rennes. Last year, they had an amazing season. They won the French Cup, beating Paris. They set up, a big screen in one of the central plazas downtown for people to watch the game. Or there had to be at least 10,000 people crowded out there. And they made it really far in the Europa League, which is a big European soccer tournament. They ended up playing Arsenal, and they played Arsenal home. I know Ella and I waited. I don't know how long you waited, but I was nine and a half hours in line. We got there at like 4 a.m. to wait to buy tickets, and then went on a Thursday night to see the game. And Rennes won against Arsenal, which is like Rennes is tiny and Arsenal's, Arsenal. It was a pretty incredible game to watch. But, I kind of followed soccer before going over there, but, being in France and going to the Stade Rennais games, I'm a proud Stade Rennais supporter.
There you go. Well, for those of you who don't know, I did SYA as well. I did it at SYA China in 2010-11. And I can still say that, there are parts of the experience that still continue to live with me. So I totally get where you guys are coming from. But I'm always reminded about those first few days, right? Those first few days, the flight over. What was it like for you guys? Those first, 24, 48, 72 hours. Then maybe like the first week you were there. What was it like to be in Rennes?
Yeah, well, I remember probably the most vivid memory is being so tired after that long journey from Boston to Paris, and then the coach ride to Rennes. You're kind of thrown in, everyone's thrown in together, and it does not take long at all to get to know everyone else and meet friends, and you're talking the whole bus ride to Rennes, and then you have this kind of hectic but also incredible moment where you're finding your host family, and there's kind of this bonjour, and you forget all of a sudden all the French you've learned the past few years. And but I mean, I think, like, at least my experience, the host families were so understanding. They know exactly what you're experiencing. They know you're exhausted, and I remember hopping in the car saying goodbye to my friends that I just met. And then what's really interesting about the first weekend is that you're not seeing any other Americans for that first weekend, pretty much. You're really just immersed in your host family, spending the whole weekend with them, getting to know them, which I think is fantastic. I remember I was super nervous to speak French. Even, you're used to it in school and you're used to having it kind of spoken more slowly, and they enunciate super clearly in school, and then you have your host parents, or if you have host siblings, they're speaking super fast to each other and you feel like you're in over your head. But I mean, you really just settle in. It doesn't take long at all, and they're super accommodating, and they welcome you in, they show you your room, they give you some space to set your things up, and then they welcome you with a great French meal. And I know that my host parents organized a picnic with their friends the first weekend, which was really nice. We got to see a beautiful park in the city. So even though it's pretty scary, the first hour or two, it really doesn't take long to settle in, and they're so nice and making sure you feel welcome. So I think I settled in super quickly, and then by the time school rolls around on Monday, you're ready to go. They show you how to get there, and you already feel like you've been there a month, which is awesome.
Yeah. Garrett.
Yeah. I would say that, the program doesn't start until you meet your host family when you get to Rennes. Because that whole, being in Boston and then taking the flight over with the SYA students and, the bus ride to Rennes, it's an awesome experience. But at that point, like, we were all still Americans and we were meeting each other as Americans. And that was great to, like, bond with people. But for me, it feels like the experience didn't really start until we got to the school that night. I met our host families, and going with, the first 24 hours starting there, the first 24 hours were terrifying. I'm not going to lie. Like, terrifying and exciting at the same time. I know some people had, like, Skyped their host families. I hadn't Skyped my host family. I'd just seen, like, their driver's licenses, and they, like, sent me an email, which I later learned French people don't like to use emotion in their letters. It's kind of just, like, periods and, like, statements, which, as an American, that was like a cultural nuance that I just didn't understand. And I was so scared that my host family would be like really strict and rigid and rude, which turned out to be the complete opposite. But, like Alice said, like, you're exhausted when you get there, and that, like, I lived a good ways outside of the city. So we had like a 20-minute car ride from the school going back home. And they were, talking about buildings in the city and kind of try to help me get my bearings. And I was so, like, kind of just nodding my head like, okay, cool. Like, I didn't understand anything they were saying, and I was really scared to speak French. But it, like, getting to the house and, settling in and it took me like 2 weeks to unpack. So I couldn't say that I unpacked that night. But then, sitting down for dinner with them, it was just, it's like hard to put the feeling into words. Like, you're scared but excited, and, like, at the same time, it's like that feeling of being new, immersed in another culture in a different country. Like, it's just an unreplicable experience. And it's really just like, so it's hard to explain. You got to experience it. But it's, as, like, terrifying it is those first 24 hours, it's an amazing experience. And and like Alice said, like, you slide into the groove right away. There was, like, for me, I didn't have the time to feel homesick. I was so overwhelmed with, like, the new culture and the new language and everything. Like, I didn't look back for at least a month.
I think what you're kind of talking about, both of you, is that exhilaration, right? Of being in a place where you have, like, only so much control of your environment, right? As students, you are, you're growing and taught to, ask for help in all these places, and now you're being asked to, like, do that again, and it can be challenging for a lot of students. But I think that adrenaline rush that you get, right, in those first few days are probably what you guys are, it's hard to encapsulate,
Yeah.
For students that are, thinking about the experience, and you're like, man, what is this experience going to be like? There is a little bit of information I did want to share with you guys about before your arrival in Rennes, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff that happens in your own homes before you even get on a plane and get to Rennes. I am the France country manager for the SYA classes here, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions you might have. But some of the basics are going to be around your flights over. SYA does organize a flight over to Paris from Boston. All students are encouraged to get onto the flight, so that way you guys can all be on one, in one kind of group when you arrive in Paris. But students that are flying from other parts of the country, maybe on the West Coast, Hawaii, Alaska, or Texas, you're more than welcome to seek out, direct flights over. We do organize it every year, and that's what our alums here were alluding to a little earlier. Also, over the summer, you will get contact information for your host families, right? You guys were probably both put in contact with your host families prior to arrival. That in itself is a process that takes place over the summer where students will fill out forms and we receive as much information as possible about students, their their current families, eating habits, religious habits, anything that you would want us to know about you goes into that survey. And that's how we will match you to your host family. And once you get your host family assignments, it's important you guys fill out all your forms on time, right? I hope Ella and Garrett, you guys were both really nice to Avery and made sure you got all your forms in on time. But for students that are looking, for next year, please, we'd love to work with you guys. If you guys have any questions, just let us know. But with that, let's go ahead and hear a little bit more about your host families. When I was in Beijing, I totally relate. I was in that, exhilarating first night of sitting on my host bed and being like, oh my God, like this is it, right? Like I'm here. I'm a little nervous, but like my host mom is preparing more food than I could ever eat, and I don't really know what to do next other than like, I guess, get hungry, And what would you guys say was some of your fondest memories of the SYA, of your host family experiences, right? Whether that's, I won't give it context. You guys can have your own favorite experiences with your host families. Go for it. What do you guys got?
Well, I absolutely just loved my host family. I don't think I could have gotten any luckier with who I was placed with. I was with two empty nesters. They were both in their late 50s. I was actually their 12th host daughter, which was pretty remarkable. So they definitely knew what to do to help me settle in and help me feel welcomed in their home. But we just got so close. I think when I reflect on what my favorite memories were, I think it was more of we had some great times traveling together, or I did a workout class with my host mom, and that was a very humbling experience. But I think it was the more weekly routine events that really stuck with me the most. Every morning, in the US, I was the person who would grab a bowl of cereal, eat it in the car on the way to school. Definitely did not take time in the morning to sit down and enjoy a meal. And every morning in Rennes with my host dad, we would enjoy a 30-minute breakfast comprised of fresh baguette and coffee and jams and their beurre salé, which is really known, it's what the region of Bretagne is known for. And we would turn on the French radio. And we would discuss anything from the possibility of aliens to politics to the most recent Stade Rennais game. And even though it's a little hard getting used to waking up and speaking French or hearing French, that was definitely a really special moment to start my day, to share that with him. And then he would also watch, and my host dad, who was retired, would also watch a movie every single night at home. So I'd sometimes join him for that. Or he would choose one that he thought I would really like and like, oh, Ella, you have to come watch this. I think you'd really like it. So that was great. And then every Sunday, we would have, because Sundays in France, everything's closed, and you really are supposed to be spending Sundays with your family. And so every Sunday evening before dinner, we would have an aperitif where my host mom would prepare little nuts and crackers and bits of cheese, and we'd all sit, if it was nice, we'd sit outside on the patio, and we'd kind of go over our week and our weekend, and we'd catch up and relax, and have that hour or so together before I would help with the finishing touches on our meal for dinner. So I think it's just those slower moments where you take the time to take that extra few minutes, hour with your family and really bond with them, where in the US it's kind of much more fast paced and you don't really get to settle down and appreciate it. So I think it was those moments that definitely stuck with me the most.
Mm.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like the little moments. Something that kind of tying this in with the first, kind of couple weeks in France. So the first weekend was closed. We couldn't see any Americans. The second weekend for me was, functionally also closed because my host family decided that they were going to pick me up from school on Friday, and then we headed down to the family beach house on the Brittany coast. And we were there until Sunday evening. It was a little chilly, but we went and we saw like these historical sites down there. We went and visited a medieval village. We, went for walks on the beach, and it was, I got to spend a full like 72 hours just with my host family. And while, like I said before, like I was, kind of scared of going into a new family at first. After that weekend, it just clicked. It was there as like a, distinct turning point. We got along so well after, like I really got to know the family and really feel comfortable around them. And that was, that's definitely a memorable experience. And it made my year just that much better. I mean, I could not have asked for a better host family. We got along super well. They loved to, joke. They had 3 kids that were all either in college or graduated. And so they were always kind of like, there was one that lived at the house and then 2 others that were, in and out. And then they had a younger girl from the western part of Brittany who went to a gymnastics academy, and she stayed there as, a host student, but she was French. And so, we got to hang out. And my host mom was a teacher. My host father happened to be a butcher, which meant that we always had fresh meat and we always had lots of it. He would always bring stuff home from his work. And I learned after the first weekend that, coming back and talking to the Americans at school, that apparently meat's not, like some families will only eat meat on certain days of the week. We had meat 3 meals a week, or 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. It was, and my host mom was just an amazing cook. It was insane. My mornings were like the opposite of what Ella described. My host father was a butcher, so he woke up at like 2 a.m. to go to work. And everyone else, my host mom was a teacher and her school started earlier than ours. So people, were kind of leaving the house at different times. So most of the time I would wake up, and I was the only one up. I'd shower and grab like a piece of bread on the way out of the house, to go to the bus. And I had to leave a little bit earlier than most people, because I lived further out. I had about a 40-minute bus, or 40-minute, different buses to 40-minute commute to school. But it sounded bad at first, but I lived right like on the same street. 2 of my best friends from SYA lived there as well, so we all took the same bus at the same stop all the way to school. And those like morning bus rides and the bus rides back from school turned out to be some of my favorite parts about SYA. Like, it was a perfect chance for us to like decompress from being in that like new environment and just like pour out everything that was on our minds. That was great. But then at night, those were probably my favorite times with my host family. That and Sunday lunch. My host mom would always cook something. She would always create a feast for dinner. No matter what day of the week it was. And everyone was at home at nights. The house was super lively, and we were all talking, watching TV, talking about politics, or what we did that day. And same thing, on Sundays, we would just kind of hang out around the house all day, and that was a great time to bond with my host family. Definitely, unforgettable moments.
Yeah, the SYA, the SYA host family experience, like I said earlier, is so core to every student experience in Ren. I think that each kid develops sort of like a host family fingerprint, right? Like, you'll develop these unique attributes that maybe like, I'm sure Garrett's French butchery vocabulary is probably pretty good, right? Like, you could probably name a couple of cuts of meat that you don't necessarily learn in class. And Ella, similarly, I'm sure you have a unique vocabulary around like French politics that you and your host dad were able to develop, or maybe some French film artistry words, right? And that's part of what was my favorite experience with SYA. It was my host mom was so open to teaching me so much about cooking and like local like nature preserves and like the different like parks and animals that live in the area. Like, that was one of my favorite experiences with my host family.
It's funny you mentioned the vocabulary thing. It's super random, but my host father, he loved, working on things and, working on the house and doing construction. And they were renovating their house while I was there. So he would come home and he would be, like working on the house and stuff. And then at dinner, they'd talk about the progress that he made. So out of anything, I learned by far the most words when it comes to like construction and building houses at my host family from dinner. And it's something like never in a million years did you learn that in school, but I could probably tell you every part of a building just from sitting at the dinner table.
Yeah. well, we won't put construction as a co-curricular, but we'd love to hear about some of your co-curriculars that you did while you were there. For those of you that are watching, co-curriculars are what SYA calls, the different types of activities students can do usually after school, whether that's student organized clubs like Model UN, or like cooking classes, or some other maybe more athletically oriented activities, volleyball, rowing. Each student does different things, so we have just a small glimpse of some of the experiences here. So if you guys would please share some of the co-curriculars that you did, if you did multiple throughout the year. I know that the SYA experience changes with the seasons, so feel free to share, the co-curriculars you were a part of. And then any that maybe your best friend or two also did, to kind of give us a nice breadth of experiences available. And this time we'll start with Garrett.
All right, so I am a runner here in Rochester, and so when we started looking for co-curriculars over in France, I looked for a track club, and I ended up joining the track club in the village that I lived in. It was, a 10-minute walk from my house, and I went every Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. It was a great experience. I got to meet tons of people there. And got to hang out with French people, and I got to stay in shape and run. I ran in a couple of races while I was over there. And at the same place where I ran track, my two buddies that lived out in the town that I lived in, Chartres-de-Bretagne, one of them played basketball and the other played soccer. So sometimes we walk to and from the activities on Wednesdays together. We had practice at the same time, so it was definitely, that was a really good experience. And then at school, I took part in the News Decoder Club, which I'll let Ella talk about that because she was the one who started it and ran it. But I'll let you talk about kind of what News Decoder is.
Yeah, well, Garrett definitely was a huge part of it. News Decoder is an international organization that is headquartered in Paris, I believe, but run by Americans. And it is basically working to empower younger people to get more into journalism and politics, and to kind of search that out in their local communities, whether it's in America or in France. I know they partner with a lot of SYA campuses and schools around the world, but one thing that was definitely happening in our own backyard was the Gilets Jaunes movement, or the yellow vest movement, as we call it in English. And so Garrett and I were able to, I know Garrett's a photographer and a videographer, and he was able to get some incredible shots of some movements that were happening in our downtown in Rennes. And we wrote about that. And that was really interesting to really examine through the lens of the people living in our own city, and things that, it was something that at least my host family talked about a lot. I'm sure yours did some, Garrett, too.
Yeah.
So that was more run kind of more in just SYA, but outside of that, I did an art class with two friends of mine, which was a very interesting experience. I know that you talked about vocabulary. I thought I knew some art vocabulary, but there'd be times when the instructor would explain something and every single word would go over my head. I had not heard any of those words before, and I'd have to turn to the person next to me in the class and ask what we were supposed to be doing and what the instructor had just said. But it was definitely a very rewarding experience. And what better place to work on your art than in France. And then I had some friends that danced at the local conservatoire, or they played badminton. I mean, I know people who continued their activities they did in the US. People also picked up new hobbies and activities like myself with art. And then I also joined a gym near school, but it was not just a gym where you could go and do your own thing. They were all workout classes focused on HIIT or high intensity interval training. So I got to know the instructors there pretty well, and the people who would do the same class times as I would. That was also just a totally different vocabulary. But that was definitely a really good experience. And they once they could kind of figure out we could understand most of the stuff they were saying and we could communicate pretty well, they were definitely talking to us and encouraging us. People were super curious and they wanted to hear more about our experiences as Americans in Rennes, and also how it compared to our homes in the US. So I definitely think extracurriculars were a huge part of getting more immersed in Rennes and in the culture.
Yeah, I am so glad you guys were able to share, such a large variety of experiences. I do want to remind everyone that's watching that they did all these activities in French, right? Except for probably news decoder, which was still half and half, right? Um,
Yeah.
you are taking that high intensity interval training class in French.
Yeah.
You're taking, a French butchery course in French with host father. Like, these are all things that you learn to expand upon with your language skills. And then they lead to more and more, I would say, like, localization, right? You then become a part of the city because, for example, let's say Garrett, like, the bus runs late on Tuesdays because there's always a game. Or, like,
Yeah.
Ella, you might know that, like, oh, the high intensity class is about to get out from the 5 p.m., and there's this rhythm to the city that you get to understand. For families that are watching, there are tons of activities at all of our campuses. And for France, there are a ton. If you have an activity that you are excited about or want to learn more about, or like maybe they have this, please, 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 keep in mind that we are always changing our variety of offered in Rennes. We want to make sure that students that are interested in something, feel free to reach out to me. You guys have already gotten emails from me. If you'd like to have an activity, and learn a little bit more about it. I will say there's also a seasonality to the activities that you do, right? Through the time that you're at SYA, you may find that you don't actually like to do something, or you want to change to something else. And so each activity comes with its own, sort of season. So I would definitely, keep an open mind. There are even things that you might not have heard of as an option for high school students to partake in. Rennes is particularly famous for circus arts. I don't know if either of you guys did the circus arts class. Did anyone?
I know someone who did
You did.
our year. Yeah. And he really
So,
enjoyed it.
yeah, so Rennes is a renowned European center for circus arts. There's a camp locally, so you can even participate in that if you'd like to. But with that, we're going to move on to our next topic here. We're going to travel. So there are two kinds of travel that SY students do. The core idea about the travel that SY does is around education, obviously. So let's first talk about some of your school trips that you took, whether it was through a class, whether it was the entire class, right, your whole cohort of SY students, or even maybe a smaller side trip or side activity you guys did on a larger trip. We'll go with Garrett.
Yeah, so the travel, that was definitely a great part of SYA. For me, I know people definitely talk about going over. I thought with independent travel that I would want to like travel on the weekends. It turned out that Rennes was such an awesome city to live in. I never wanted to leave on the weekends. But that said, on the breaks, when we had the chance to either with the school or independently go somewhere and stay there for a decent period of time, it was a great experience. My favorite trip with the school was probably the one that we did to the Loire Valley in Toussaint break at the end of October, early November. We went into the Loire Valley, and we had been studying in history class the history of the Loire Valley and the aristocracy in France. And in art class or art history, we had been studying the architecture of the chateaus in the Loire Valley. And it was really, during the trip, we went to a ton of chateaus and different historical sites. And it was really incredible to be able to take, everything that we've been learning in class and then see it in real time, in real life, and, look at the architecture of the chateaus and understand exactly, why things were going on, why things were the way they were, how they got to be that way, and, like how they were built. And the way that tied in was really cool. And of course, to see these massive chateaus like the Chateau Chambord, which I believe it's the largest castle in Europe. It's, just really incredible. And then as far as independent travel goes, my favorite trip was probably the one I took after the school trip over spring break. Over spring break, we were allowed to travel internationally as long as it was within Europe. And one of my good buddies and I went to Bucharest, Romania, Athens, Greece, and Mykonos, Greece, and that was a really awesome trip. Places like Bucharest. I don't know why else I would have I need to go to Bucharest. We wound up there because it was cheaper to take a long layover in Bucharest than fly directly from France to Greece. But it wound up being a really awesome city, and I'm super glad that I got to see it. And then being able to explore Greece, just the two of us, it was a really amazing experience.
Yeah, and Elle, really quickly before we go, I do want to just build a little bit more context into some of the independent travel opportunities. So as Garrett said, we allow students to travel internationally during their winter and spring breaks. So long as they have to create their own itineraries, they have to be signed off on by their families, both in the U.S. and their host families and the SYA administration. Everybody wants to be informed about where students are going, and so we make sure that students are always letting us know where they're planning to go. If they don't receive, confirmation from the SYA administration or any of their families, they can't go on the trips. So that's just a little bit of context around that. Ella, go for it.
Yeah, well, definitely just building off of what Garrett said, I think that the most rewarding aspect of traveling, especially the trips with the school, was being able to apply what we'd been learning in the classrooms. And I mean, Garrett gave the example of when we saw the chateaus in the Loire Valley, but I had no idea that there was that much. I knew that there was thought put into building castles, but just hearing my art history teacher explain it in class and then being able to witness it myself was an unbelievable experience. The same thing happened when we went to Paris, and I took French literature and we'd read a play beforehand in class and analyzed it, and then I actually got to see a performance of that play, which was unbelievable. And then even with Mont Saint-Michel, which is on the coast of Brittany, we also studied that in art history, and that was incredible to experience in person and to walk through the inside knowing the symbolic meaning behind each aspect of the architecture and of the design. So I think that made every corner of France that we visited that much more meaningful in the grand scheme of things. And then building upon the independent travel, that's available to students, I think starting after Toussaint break. So around late November, early December. And so my friends and I, we jumped at the opportunity to explore other parts of France, and we went to Strasbourg in eastern France the first weekend of December to see the Christmas markets, since it's known as being the capital of Christmas. And that was an unbelievable thing to experience. Every single street was decked out in lights and decorations, and you saw the stalls selling ornaments and anything you could imagine. And so that was really cool to see. And then in terms of international travel, over spring break, my friends and I went to Portugal, Lisbon and Porto, and then Barcelona. And even though that was incredible to experience, I definitely found myself by the end of the trip missing speaking French and missing my host family. So while it's great to really be able to experience those places, you definitely still feel that longing to go back to Rennes and to French culture.
It's definitely kind of building off of that. It's really interesting how much Rennes and like France, becomes home.
Definitely.
I remember that exact feeling around my time at SYA and just being so ready to go back to Beijing after being around in the countryside. I can only imagine when I visit these other countries, China being so vast. It was a little different for me, but it's great to hear some of your adventures, and it sounds like you guys really got to do deep dives into your own experiences. I did want to have just two more questions here. Was there anything else that you guys would like to share about the experience? What like if you were talking to an SYA student today, right, what would you tell them? Why should they go on SYA?
Garrett, do you want to start off with that one?
If you got something in your mind, go ahead.
Okay.
We'll pick one.
I think two of my, before when I was making the decision of whether or not to go to SYA France, I think the two things that my two perhaps biggest concerns or worries were around my host family and fitting in and acclimating to that different environment, and then also the academics and the college process. So to touch on the latter one first, I was a senior when I did it, which is not the most usual thing to do for your senior year. Everyone kind of sees your senior year as, oh, it's the culmination of your time in high school and it's your last opportunity to go to prom or to do this, and you're applying to colleges. But I thought it was the perfect transition for me to college. I was able to manage the college process with the help of the college counselor over there and many of the teachers. They were super understanding, and I was able to still get that support that I needed. And then in terms of the classes I was taking, I was still able to be in my BC calculus class. I was taking, my English class was definitely still pushing me, and it was a bit different than I probably would have experienced in the US, but I think it was better, a lot more reflection and personal writing, and it was definitely still on the theme of being a foreigner or an expatriate, which was still very relevant to our experience. And then I do not think that having classes in French slowed me down at all. In fact, I think it actually pushed me to, I think I actually became a better student because of it. And so I think academically, it might have been the best thing I could have done for myself as a senior in preparation for college. And then in terms of the host family, I think I've touched on this quite a few times already, and Garrett has too, but you really do become a part of their family when you're there, and it doesn't take 6 months to feel that way. I think after the first week or two, I was definitely beginning to have that sense of, okay, I'm here, I'm a part of this family, and they treat me like family. I mean, my host mom would even be like, oh, Ella, you know, you haven't been going to the gym recently. They're like, you haven't been going on your runs. Like, don't you think you should get outside? Like, it's a beautiful day. I mean, it's that kind of looking after you. We're like, oh, Ella, like you slept until noon to this Sunday. Like, so I think like they're really looking out for you, and they're as excited to have you in their house as you are to be with them. And you definitely, it's different. It's a different culture, but they show that they care about you in their own way. And they really are looking out for you. I'm still in contact with my host family. We message every few days, and they'll call me for my birthday or call me to hear about how my experience in college has been. So they really do care about you, and they want you to have an amazing experience. So I think that even though it can be a bit daunting to be just thrown into a new family, a new environment, it's incredible how close you become with them, and how much they really do welcome you in. And after you leave with a second family, I now have my American family and a French family as well, which I think is really special.
Yeah, I think as far as you know, like nerves and worries go, that nothing really started to hit me until like a day or two before we left. You know, I love traveling. The idea of living in another country has always fascinated me. So for me, at least, making the decision was, it wasn't that tough. But I would say, you know, to anyone that's kind of on the fence, just go for it. Be bold, take that leap, and just don't look back. And same thing for while you're over there. You know, if you're presented with a new opportunity, take it and just go with it. Try and speak French, and, you know, try and put yourself out there. And it's definitely tough. Like, there are times that I look back at now and say, man, I wish I'd taken that opportunity. You know, man, I wish that I put myself out there more. You know, I could have done that, like, in hindsight, that, you know, I was worrying for nothing. But I think the same can be said, you know, about choosing to go to SY. Like, you know, it was, as we've talked about for the past half an hour, it's an amazing experience. You know, there's a lot of stuff that, you know, like that feeling of being in another country and another culture for the first time, you just can't replicate it. And, you know, once you get out of high school, living with a host family isn't quite the same, because, you know, while you're still in high school, you know, you're like their child. and you still got to ask permission from mom to go out, and stuff like that. And I'm sure Ella and I had different experiences. I was 2 years younger when I did it. If you're younger, I'd say do it as young as you can. I didn't have to. There was a lot of stuff like I didn't have to worry about the college process, and I didn't have to worry about junior year. There was a lot of time that I got to just and really experience France and what France had to offer. Um, but going back to what I was saying earlier, just I, I would say go for it. If you're on the fence, there's definitely rational worries, but at the end of the day, SY looks out for you. There's nothing that's going to go catastrophically wrong. Obviously right now with what we're dealing with it's totally unpredictable and it's an unprecedented situation. But anything, SY provides a platform where you can go over and no matter your comfort level going in, they make sure that you're okay and you're going to succeed over there. So um, you know like I was saying, just don't look back, go for it.
Yeah, and if I can add like one more thing to that,
Sure.
um, I mean, it's what's incredible about the experience. I mean, I don't think Garrett and I can do it justice. I mean, you just have to experience it. And if you applied, I think that's enough of an interest and a curiosity to just go for it. There's
Absolutely.
really no experience like it. And what's really amazed me is that it wasn't just the experiences I had during those 9 months, but it's how much it's impacted my life afterwards. I don't think I'm not the same person as I was before I went. And I think that in terms of like how Garrett mentioned, really taking advantage of opportunities, now being in college and being kind of in that next chapter of my life, I've undoubtedly benefited from learning to take advantage of what's offered to me, pursue things that maybe I was a bit too scared to pursue before. But I think you just keep reaping the benefits past those 9 months. And I think that'll continue for many years to come. So it's not just those 9 months that you're going to walk out with the benefits from, but just, I think, a lifetime afterwards of just those, because I think it's also just at such a transformative time in your life. I mean, high school it's an incredible opportunity to be able to do that in high school and not be waiting until college. And I think that if you have the opportunity to do that, 100% take it.
And I think,
Yeah.
like I was talking about like coming back a little bit. I think that, like you said, it's such a transformative experience. It just changes how you see things. And, it's not even just the experience of being there that's amazing, but then you come back and it changes how you look at, where you came from and like back home. Like for me, at least, I got a totally new, I'm still living in Rochester for this year and next year, 2 years after SYA. But I got a totally new appreciation for like where I came from and, the meaning of home and like, what your identity is culturally, linguistically, and, everything like that. It really, shapes how you see the world, the experience you get.
I couldn't have said it better, guys. Like in my mindset, there was so much to learn after I came back from my time at SYA because I kind of like you open your eyes to like the structure of America, the structure of our politics, the structure of how we do things. Right? You get to see and live in this world, and then you get to bring it around, and you just are so like. There's not just one way to do things, right? Like there's not just one way to skin a pig. There's not just one way to, like get soccer tickets. There are just so many ways to run things. And when you go on an experience like this, it really does benefit you throughout your adolescence and well into your adulthood. And there are alums to this day that still, credit a lot of their professional development, a lot of their personal development out of their SYA, out of their time at SYA. So there's tons to be shared. I want to thank you so much to Ella and Garrett for being with me today. We loved hearing a ton about your experiences. And for students that are watching, if there's anything that we didn't answer, feel free to email me. You can find my email in your email box. I will email you a bunch, whether it's about your contract, whether it's about any questions, any specifics. If you have any medical questions, we oftentimes get medical questions. Please feel free to reach out to me. We're more than happy to, research as much as we can about maybe if you have a medical issue or something that you'd like to, continue addressing in Ren, please let us know. If you have any dietary restrictions, all of that will, we can help answer questions. But with that, I want to thank you again to Ella and Garrett. And thank you so much to everyone watching. All right. Again, my name is Enrique Granados, and I'm Assistant Director of Missions and the SYA France Country Manager for this year. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.